I'm so excited. One of our favorite people, probably because he's Canadian, he's so nice, is joining us today. David Doel is, of course, the host of The Rational National. And you've got the green screen in the background. You're looking, your studio is so nice. I'm so jealous.
I'm so glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you for having me.
So like the political situation, I woke up like 2 days ago and was like, wait, Canada's now blowing up. What is happening?
Yeah.
All right, let's just start off with some like COVID stuff, because we started off the show talking about stupidity of the Biden administration. It's like when, the Bush administration said like, oh, we're just going to stop reporting on all things involving the environment and like clean air. It's like if we don't mention it, it's not there.
Yeah.
So what is the COVID policy in Canada? Like, how are you guys handling it?
So it really depends on provinces. Provinces tend to dictate their healthcare situation. Like we have an overall, Canada Health Act, but it depends on the provinces how they want to implement their COVID policy. So, a lot of what I understand is from Ontario, where I live, but there have been, it's varied, of course, depending on the situation. So there are vaccine mandates, for instance, to get into a restaurant, to eat at a restaurant, you have to be vaccinated. Workplaces are not told that they have to mandate vaccines, but it is recommended, and a lot of places do because, if you're going to work somewhere, the vast majority of people in Canada are vaccinated. They have at least 2 doses. 85 to 90% have 2 doses. Wow. The booster has been a little slower though, so I think we're still around maybe 60% with the booster shot. But it's been increasing. So, a lot of the pushback, and we'll get to it. A lot of the pushback that we've seen to these health measures, the vaccine mandate, has really just been from a tiny fraction of people. And again, it isn't even there is no vaccine mandate. Like you can still operate in society. You don't need to get vaccinated if you don't want to. But it's, I don't know why you wouldn't at this point. We're having a lot of the same discussions in Canada as Americans are having, I think just on a smaller level and not to as great of a degree as Americans are having. So, our politicians here, for the most part, even conservatives, are pro-vaccine, and they're not, trying to speak out against it. But there are those that try to play to the base, and at least, that small, tiny part of the base, and try to play up, our rights and freedoms and all this bullshit, when in reality, basic public health measures that we've done during any other, pandemic, masking, vaccines, physically distancing. So a lot of our policy, a lot of our approach has really been individualistic. And that's, I think, been a major issue, worldwide in how we've handled this pandemic. But when it comes to, specific policies, as I said, mandates for getting into restaurants and that kind of thing. But generally, and, masking indoors, but generally it's been, I don't know. I think because most Canadians are vaccinated and understand the threat of the pandemic, we are taking it seriously. There hasn't really, I guess, been the need to maybe be more forceful in sorts of policies like mandating workplaces to vaccinate the way that you may have seen, I guess the US has that with certain employers. But we haven't really seen the push for that, though. It may sound like we have because of some of the reaction coming out of it. But, when it comes to our deaths, we have about 34,000 deaths total during this pandemic. About
total.
100. Yeah, total.
Wait, what is the size of Canada? Can we just
So we're 1/10 the size of the US. So if you just multiply it by 10, so I'm not sure. I guess so. US have a lot more deaths than we do.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's the point we're trying to make people, okay? In case you don't want to do the math, it's that we have a lot more deaths than Canada does.
Yeah. 340,000. So basically, there's clearly a lot more deaths in the U.S., doing the math there. But 3.7 million cases total, 10,000 new cases over the last day or so. So, there still, of course, has been an increase with Omicron, but it has gone down since we've taken it a little more seriously. In Ontario, at least, the first 2 weeks of the year, we were going to have schools reopen, but then because of Omicron and that increase, there was actually a pause on that. So schools were closed for the first 2 weeks of the year. They are now open back up, but there is still strict policy around masking. And when it comes to certain workplaces, so hospitals, schools, the staff there have to be vaccinated. So there is, when it comes to certain workplaces, there is a vaccine mandate when you are dealing with, the public on a consistent basis, like at a hospital or in a school. But, and Yeah. So, generally it's kind of just a small example of what's been happening in the U.S. Just, I guess it hasn't been as bad as Americans have seen. And I think a large part of that is, of course, the culture. We don't
Right.
really have a Fox News here, even though we do have conservative media, but it's not as easily accessible, I guess, as maybe, just switching on the television and seeing Fox News. So there isn't that impact to the same degree, though, of course, social media is kind of what's behind this latest craze
Right.
that's been going on in Ottawa here. So that, of course, has had a massive impact. But generally, all things considered, of course, we could be doing a lot better for sure. We should be doing, contact tracing.
Right.
There's been a lack of that, I think, generally in the West. Not enough at-home tests has been another major issue. So I've been holding on, for dear life to these 4 at-home tests I've had for the past month, just because, like, we can't. It's hard to find them. Like, it's still hard to find them. So that's been a major issue. There should be a way. Like, our government should be sending us these at-home tests. Americans have it now because of the way that healthcare is distributed in Canada on a a provincial basis. We have to so there is no overall way grand strategy in terms of sending people sending people or masks as well, but sending people tests. So they've been basically you have to go to your local drugstore and pick them up. But that's been the biggest issue, I think, is lack of contact tracing and a lack of at-home tests.
So it's interesting because, all right, we're looking at the United States, and I'm glad we're looking at this map to see where kind of the hotspots are. But Ottawa, why Ottawa? And I kind of want to loop back. It's like a 2-part question here. So, what parts of Canada are ripe for this kind of right-wing organizing, anti-vax organizing, I should say, and simultaneously, like, it's interesting you say social media is driving this, because I would think from a public health perspective in Canada that there would be pushback against even reporting such a small group of individuals who are protesting it, because it could, of course, spread misinformation and inspire others to do the same thing. I'm not one for censorship, but this is like, if the press treated every protest equally, this might be a fair conversation, but they don't. And the press definitely amplified what's happening on social media. The international press did. I, woke up to it a couple of days ago. So why Ottawa? Are there other regions that are very conservative? And the truckers, of course, and then how the press is responding. Are people criticizing that?
So it's happening in Ottawa simply because that's the capital. So that's where all the laws are made. So that's why they've all kind of converged in Ottawa. Alberta, I would say, is the largest hotbed for this sort of right wing thinking. Though these pockets exist everywhere. I mean, it's largely a rural Canadian thing. That isn't to paint just generally all rural areas like this, but that's where you find a lot of this this sort of far right sentiment. But it is largely Alberta, definitely a major piece of it, and that's where one of the main organizers of this so-called freedom convoy is a white nationalist. I mean, there's videos of him discussing his thoughts about this. Other organizers have tried, at least rhetorically or publicly, to try to separate themselves from him, but he's still a part of it. He's still on social media discussing what they're doing with the 7 million plus they've raised on GoFundMe.
What?
Yeah, they've raised over $7 million. Is
there a sense of where it's coming from? I mean, is there like international money coming in?
Yeah, definitely. There isn't. Yeah.
Oh, shocker.
Yeah. So it's not clear where all of it's coming from, but definitely, I know GoFundMe had initially put a pause on their fundraising because they weren't sure where this money was going to, and they're still not really sure. I mean, no one really knows. When this convoy first came into Ottawa, restaurants were turning them away because they were trying to go in unmasked, trying to get food, and they were being pushed out. So what some of them ended up doing is going to a homeless soup kitchen, barging into there, pressuring the staff. Yeah, they took money took food from the homeless because they couldn't.
Are you kidding?
No, you can look this up. It's now, to be fair, not all of them did this, but yes, a number of them did this. They went into a homeless shelter, bullied the staff there and got food from the homeless. So it gives you an idea of the kinds of people that are a part of this movement. I mean, you see Nazi flags flying. You see a
Wow.
lot of that far right sentiment throughout this thing. And what parts or what certain people will say that are part of this, they'll be like, oh, that's, a few bad individuals, a few bad apples. But if you saw that in any other rally, if that was like, I don't know, at a Bernie Sanders rally, at an environmentalist rally, at any other rally, we would push those people out. We wouldn't allow them to be with us. But they're still there. They're doing their bullshit. And when you accept them into the group, then I'm sorry, but you're all that way now.
That's right.
Unless you push them out, then that is how you are being identified as. And you have to, and now, to be fair, like, the numbers now apparently are down to like 50 people. There's like 50 people at the Capitol. This
is ridiculous. It's getting this
Yeah.
much attention with 50 people. Are you kidding me? I mean, look, you're empowering them, but what it's doing is it's not just empowering maybe some people, maybe not in Canada, but it's like empowering people globally to be like, oh, if Canada's like this, then we can too. It's like you said, there's $7 million. Who knows where that's coming from? Sorry, go ahead.
The issue though is like, this is always the delicate balance is we should still, it still needs to be covered to call out what is going on, to expose these people for who they are. Because if you don't cover it, then you're sort of giving into their idea that, oh, look, they're ignoring us,
right.
Which they still claim that the media is ignoring this. Like, no, there's a lot of media worldwide about what's going on here. But you have to, like, it's a delicate balance between how much should we cover this because it isn't that many people really, but at the same time, they are essentially shutting down downtown Ottawa. People can't leave their homes. They can't go out. The mall's been closed for a week. So there's enough people where they've had...
The mall's been closed. Can you even
they marched, a bunch of them marched through the big mall in Ottawa without masks on, and after that they had to close down the mall. So the mall's been closed for the past few days. It's apparently not closed for the entire week. So they've shut down, even though it's not that many trucks, there is still enough trucks there to shut down these streets. People can't move around. The cops don't seem all that concerned at the moment. I imagine if it was Black Lives Matter or Indigenous protesters or environmentalists, it would be a much different story. But so this has all been essentially enabling them to continue what is going on. Now, it is incredibly cold right now, so I'm sure that has helped to whittle down the numbers to where they currently are at around 50 people, and then there apparently like a 200 or so outside of the movement, whatever that means. So there's like 50 downtown, then 200 or so still kind of lounging around. So, 250 at most apparently right now in downtown Ottawa, but it's still enough with their trucks to shut down the city. And it is becoming a major issue. And again, if it was any other group fighting actual capital, this is also why they're allowed to get away with this.
That's right.
They aren't fighting capitalism. They're fighting to open up capital. So if it's, a movement in a different direction, there's going to be a much different response. But because they are pro-capitalism, then, what's going on for the people in power is perfectly fine.
So, two questions here. Why truckers? It's obviously supply chain is a big conversation right now. So, I mean, there are plenty of different industries in which people are a little bit more conservative. I'm not saying that this is even representative of all truckers, but why truckers? And then tell us about how Trudeau is kind of relating to everything right now.
So there is a vaccine mandate on truckers to cross the border, and the vast majority of them are vaccinated. The actual organization that represents truckers in Canada is against the convoy. Wow. So this has largely been co-opted by a small group of people to make it sound like, oh, you got to be with the truckers, which I am with the truckers. 90% of them are vaccinated. Yeah. They are on the roads doing their job. They don't support this convoy. You are the ones against the truckers, but they have made it out to try and make it out to be this like working class issue when that's not at all what is going on here. It has been co-opted by a far right movement and about, freedoms, general freedoms. And then when you ask them what freedoms are being restricted, oh, I can't go and eat without a mask in McDonald's without a vaccine. Oh, okay, that's your freedom that's being restricted. Like, talk to the Indigenous protesters who had their land stolen. Like, it's completely ridiculous. And in terms of Trudeau, he has spoken out against it, and he has, tried to label this as on the Conservative Party, which is fine. But as the Prime Minister, don't you have a little more power to, I don't know, do something else? Now, to be fair, others will say, well, if you advocate for, police action in this case, then you're essentially greenlighting police action when it comes to a Black Lives Matter protest or something else. And my response to that is that it depends on the situation. Like, what are you fighting for? Are you being disruptive in the sense where you are actually hurting the very people that you're pretending to fight for? Like, all of it for me is in context. And even apart from that, just simply, we should acknowledge the hypocrisy here of how different groups are treated depending on what they're actually fighting for and who are the ones that are doing the protesting.
So David, our producer, just updated us that Quebec recently implemented a vaccine mandate to enter cannabis and liquor stores. Vaccine appointments skyrocketed. And this is that carrot and stick. It's like, if you have to actually be part of society, whether it's getting on a plane. My frustration in the US right now is I actually think more people are going to fly on the plane, and the industry, everybody will be more protected as a whole. But simultaneously, there are a lot of industries that can make these decisions. There are companies that can make these decisions if it brushes up against, whatever the law is in Canada. What is the percentage of like far right in Canada? Like, can you help us kind of understand the map? Like,
I just want to mention first, Quebec was also going to implement a tax on the unvaccinated. There was so much pushback to that that they didn't end up doing it. I actually don't think that's a great idea. I think mandates make a lot more sense in encouraging people to get the vaccine, and
it empowers them too, because they're like, they don't want to be controlled by the government. And it's just like, oh, here's another thing, and their little movement gets louder.
And also, I imagine the tax would fall mostly on those who are lower income, and it just that kind of thing would make sense. But when it comes to the mandate to enter cannabis and liquor stores, these mandates, they work. Now, again, it's a mandate depending on where you're going. So it's not really like you're not being held down and given the vaccine. But if you want to participate in society and you care about society, then we should be vaccinated to protect others. Now, when it comes to the percentage of the far right here, I don't know. It's really hard. This is a number that's it's. I feel like Canadian media, this is where we fail. Quite honestly, there is not a lot of really detailed information on how common this sort of thinking is. Now, there has been measures put in place in terms of labeling certain groups as terrorist organizations, like the Proud Boys are now labeled a terrorist organization, so which has made it harder for them to in Canada, which has made it harder for them to fundraise and to recruit people. But in terms of a percentage here, it's I can't even really wager a guess, to be honest with you. It's tough to really know, but it's enough to have an impact when they all band together and shut down a city. So, there's at least that voice there. And now, actually, as of recording, just before recording this, the leader of the Conservative Party was voted out as leader, and they're going to pick somebody else. So the current leader is a little more rhetorically, socially progressive, at least has tried to be a little more welcoming in that sense. And part of the party, at least a third of the party, was not happy with that. They're the ones that initiated the vote to oust him. They have been successful in getting others on board, so he may possibly be replaced by somebody who's even more conservative than he is, which is scary to me, but we're going to find out where that goes. But it gives you an idea of where the pressure points here are for the right. I mean, even though they may be a small percentage of Canada, they are still a large percentage of the Conservative Party.
Conservative Party, got it. Okay, that was my next question.
And I think a recent poll showed that 50% of them, of Canadian Conservative voters, think that Trump won the election, or doubt that Biden won the election. So, about half of the Conservative Party thinks this insanity. So now, when it comes to numbers, it's hard to gauge because not everybody votes, and that kind of it's hard to put an actual figure on that. But it's still, when it's half of your base thinks complete lunacy, then that's going to have a real impact on public policy as a whole, because then you're going to have MPs that want to speak to that, and they're going to be representatives of that in Parliament, and that's going to have an impact on society as a whole. So, this next year, with a new leader in the Conservative Party, I think will really dictate how serious it's going to get here, if we are going to follow in the footsteps of the U.S. when it comes to, Trumpism, as that's already been brewing here for a while, but will it have a public face, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
What percentage is the Conservative Party? Can we just brief analysis of like the political parties in Canada? Who
Yeah,
makes
I almost
up
have to look at
what?
like the recent election. So because elections here are so weird, like our parties form majority governments with a
Right.
minority of the vote. So, Trudeau, I think all of his majorities have been under 50% of the vote. But in terms of the actual, so they've always come in second place generally. It's usually the Liberals up
Oh,
top,
interesting.
and then it's the Conservatives, and then the NDP are way below. So the battles each election is usually between the Liberals and the Conservatives. And what ends up happening often is that the so-called left vote gets split between the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens. But there is also a swing vote between the Conservatives and the Liberals. So, there's a lot at play there. But in terms of a percentage, again, because like 60% of us vote, it's hard to understand or hard to know what percentage of that really is actually conservative, or they just vote, based on one thing they heard. Like I've discussed this before in the past. The first time I voted conservative. And this is before I
Wow.
knew anything about politics. It was simply because we had a liberal for a long time. I'm like, oh, change would be good. Let's vote for this guy. So,
Right.
like, that's a lot of people, right? A lot of people don't really follow what's going on. They're just like, oh, I want a new face. And they vote. So, even if you vote conservative or you vote liberal, it doesn't mean you really support what that platform or what that party represents, because it may just be, oh, I want a new face. So, it's, yeah. And
Do
when
you
it
think that
comes
the
to,
Conservatives will overplay their hand if they pick a more radical right leader? Like there might be an opening to challenge the establishment, challenge Trudeau, but if they go with somebody, if they go in a more extreme direction, do you think that'll empower or weaken Trudeau?
I think it'll empower him. I think
Yeah.
it will. I think it could have a negative impact on our political discourse generally, just the
Mhm.
day to day and what is discussed. But when it comes to an actual election, I find it very hard to believe that a social conservative can win, because that's
Mm.
ultimately what has hurt previous conservative leaders. It hurt Harper, it hurt Andrew Scheer. That's why the recent leader tried to speak a little more to that uh, more socially progressive, I guess. Again, rhetorically, who knows, in terms of his actual votes and everything, that's separate. But in terms of the rhetoric and pushing a different
Right.
message, he did try to speak more to that, because he understood it wasn't a good look.
Right.
So they tried to move away from that. But now, if they go in a more conservative direction, I do think ultimately it will hurt them as a party, but it will, I think, have a negative impact on our discourse and what we discuss in the day to day.
David, I love talking Canada with you. We have to do this more often. I love
Yes.
talking international politics in general because it's just sometimes it can be refreshing, and also knowing that there's something much bigger at play here.
Yeah.
Really fascinating to see that like they're raising that much money, and I'm really curious where. So if you hear anything, let us know. I'd love to pick up this conversation. David Doel. David. Oh, whoa, that was a big zoom in. After not feeling well all day from my booster, I'm like, okay, I can now see all of my words.
Oh my
David,
God.
thank you so
I've
much for.
barely been sleeping.
Oh, well, you
So,
have a child. You have
I'm
a
amazed I even
baby.
got out words today. Yeah, that's the reason, actually.
How old is he now?
Just turned a year. It's a year and a month.
Oh my god. Oh my
He's
gosh. How
wonderful,
fun.
but my God, is he crazy?
It's a lot of work. Oh wait, I hear it gets worse.
Oh, I know.
All right, David, thanks for joining us. Hope to talk to you very soon again.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, we are independent media. I don't know if you know that. We're independent media, and we are only able to function and survive with your help as patrons. You never know what the algorithm is going to do. One day you're making a little money on the algorithm, the next day they've completely cut you dry. We are not Joe Rogan. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to be peddling any vaccine conspiracy theories anytime soon. So, as a result, we really rely on Patreon. So, if you are not already and you love this show and you have a little bit of extra money and you're willing to be part of our Patreon community, we can do more. We can have a lot more fun. In fact, in the next month or so, we're going to be announcing some new things that patrons will exclusively get. And trust me, they are fun. Go to patreon.com/the Nomiki Show. If you're already a patron, thank you so much. You make this show run. If you are already a patron and want to up it, we're always grateful. And sometimes, if you're able to do so, that's able to cover folks who can no longer afford to be patrons or having a tough time right now. And if you are, please email us at thenomikishow@gmail.com. We're always working things out. Got lots of different options here. You get mugs, you get bags, you get stickers, all sorts of swag, and of course, special events and conversations, exclusive conversations. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/thenomiki show.